Okay, this next part of the grammar tutorial on the infrastructure of language and how grammar works deals with the most common student errors that I've experienced over the last about 10 years of teaching. The same normal errors keep coming up, and so I like to break down why those errors occur and how to fix them as well. So let's take a look at some of these problems and their solutions. The first major problem that students struggle with in their papers is subject-verb agreement. So subjects come in two basic forms. They come in singular forms and plural forms, generally speaking. Singular subjects include examples like he, she, it, Joe, Jane, someone, that person, the police officer. All of those are singular because they're just one entity. And those singular subjects need to go with singular verbs like goes, runs, plays, walks, hides, etc. You'll notice with the singular verbs they all end in S. It's called the S form of the verb, and the vast majority of our singular verbs in English end in the letter S. So it helps to remember, I think, sometimes singular verbs end in S, singular S. So you can pick any one of those subjects and match it up with any one of those verbs and it'll sound just fine. He runs, someone walks, that person plays, the police officer hides, he goes. All those sound right. They all match up perfectly because they're consistent. The singular subject matches the singular verb. We also have plural subjects where there's more than one. It's actually kind of easy to remember because singular there's just one and plural there's more than one. Those are the only two things we really have to worry about. So plural subjects include things like they, Joe and Jane, people, police officers, things like that. Plural verbs include words that do not end in S usually, like go, run, play, walk, hide. Okay? And again, just like with our singular subjects and singular verbs, our plural subjects will all match up just fine with our plural verbs. They play, Joe and Jane go, people run, police officers go. All of those match up with any one of those verbs, plural subjects, plural verbs. The writing fundamental that students need to remember is that verbs need to match their subjects in number. So certain combinations sound weird to us as native English speakers because we've learned English by listening. We don't usually think about, well, why does that sound weird? Why can't I say he play or Joe go? Right? We can't say those things. We can't say people plays or police officers goes. Those don't sound right to us. And it's because there are rules that govern why things sound weird. So there are rules underneath our language that we're not really aware of usually because we're not taught it in school necessarily unless we take a special class, or maybe we are taught it but it's only when we're really, really young and we haven't thought about it in a long time. And so we need to remember that our verbs need to match our subjects in number. We have to have a singular verb with a singular subject. We have to have plural verbs with plural subjects. Here's a couple examples that we can work through together. I usually just have my students kind of yell out the answers with me. So we have teachers lecture their students, right? Teachers lecture their students. If we change that just a little bit, the teacher lectures his or her students. So the first example there, we had the plural teachers, and we chose the plural form of the verb lecture. In the second example there, we have the teacher, there's just one of them, and we matched it with the singular form of the verb lectures. Here's another example. The students learn new information. All right, again, we have a plural subject, students. What do? They learn. So we take the plural form of the verb. Next example, a student learns new information. All right, so a student learns new information. Again, we just have one student there, and so one student singular learns singular. The teacher and the student work together. They work together. Note that we have two entities there because it's a compound subject joined with and. The teacher and the student. That's two people. So those two people, that's plural, they work together. Right? Here's another little bit tricky one. Everyone works hard in the class. Everyone works hard in the class. Now you might be thinking, everyone, that sounds like a lot of people. But we have certain words in English that are indefinite pronouns that we're not really sure how many of them there are, and everyone is one of those pronouns. Those indefinite pronouns always take the singular. So we have everyone works. It's one of those crazy words that you might have to look up every once in a while, and just remember that it always takes the singular. All right. We'll look at some more of those examples in the worksheet a little bit later. So everyone works hard in the class. And again, we can visually take a look at this and how they come together. So we have purple is for plural. So we have a plural subject in purple. We chose the purple plural form of the verb. The turquoise there is for singular. So in the next example, we have a singular subject, the teacher, and we have a singular form of the verb, lectures. The purple there is the plural. We didn't need the plural because we had a singular subject. And that's true with all of these different examples, that the singular matches the singular and the plural matches the plural. Singular subject, singular verb, plural subject, plural verb. I'm sure you get the idea by now, so we'll move on. Another thing with verbs that we have to worry about are tenses. Now, technically in English, there are really only two tenses. There's the present tense and there's the past tense. But we sometimes include the future tense as well, but future tense requires a helping verb. Now, when you start to add in crazy things like mood and aspect of verbs, we get weird things like the future perfect progressive tense or something like that. But all we're really concerned with, for the most part in writing, in basic writing, is the present tense and the past tense. So present tense are actions that are occurring at the time of speaking. I am giving this presentation, or I give this presentation. You listen to this presentation. All right? I run, he runs. These are all things that are happening in the present. The past tense is for verbs that is for actions rather that have been completed in the past. They are done and they're over with. So I taught my classes this morning. I drove to school. Those things are all done and over with. They happened already, so they're finished. Future tense are actions that will occur or that could occur, and those require a helping verb. So we have things like I will run today. I will take my dog for a walk. I will make some coffee. Those are all things that will happen in the future. We could also use helping verbs like might. You know, I might make some coffee later. I might meet my friends. I could meet my friends. Those are all helping verbs that give us a little bit more of a conditional sense to the verbs that we use. The real important thing to remember about our verbs is that your tenses need to remain consistent in a sentence, in a paragraph usually, and also usually for an entire piece of writing. Whenever you write something, your tense should be consistent throughout your writing sample, like your essay or your email. You should keep your verb tenses the same unless there's a really good reason not to. So let's take a look at some examples of this. Teddy Roosevelt was the 26th president, right? So what are our clues that Teddy Roosevelt, why do we know that it's was? How can we tell that? Well, we have a couple clues here. The first one is 26th president, and the other one is Teddy Roosevelt. Both of those things let us know that it's the past tense. So past tense. So we're on our 44th president now, so we know that that 26th president, that's done and over with. It's already happened. And Teddy Roosevelt, he's not doing so great now. He, unfortunately, has passed away a long, long time ago. So he is also gone. Both of those things let us know that it's in the past. It's done and over with, right? So it's definitely was in the past. When we went to the store, I bought a soda. Okay? So what's our clue in this sentence? What lets us know that it should be past tense? The word went there. Went is the past tense of the verb go, and so it's the past tense. We want to make sure we choose the past tense of the verb that we do for the second verb. So went, bought, those are both in the past tense. We wouldn't choose by because then we'd be mixing and matching. We want to keep our verb tenses consistent. Take a look at another example here. Whenever we go to the store, I buy a soda. What? Didn't we just say it was bought? Aren't those almost exactly the same sentences? Well, they're very similar, but what's our clue that lets us know that it should be in the present tense? Well, we have the word go there, and the word go is in the present tense, so we want to choose the present tense of the verb buy. So go and buy, both in the present tense. In the previous example, went and bought, both in the past tense. As long as they're consistent, that's what we're looking for. We want to be consistent, keep them the same. One more example here, a little tricky. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, Ophelia kills herself. All right. This one's a little bit tricky, and the clue that we're looking for here is that it's in Shakespeare's Hamlet. So when we're talking about works of fiction like books or plays or movies, we talk about them as if they're happening in the present. The events as if they're happening in the present. So that might not be relevant to anything that you're going to write about in a writing class, but it might be helpful in a literature class to remember that we usually talk about works of fiction in the present tense. And I don't usually mark my students down for anything like that, but it is a little nitty-gritty detail that might be helpful to some people. Another major problem that students struggle with grammar is that you want to make sure you don't have any ambiguous pronouns. Remember, pronouns are those words that take the place of nouns in our sentences. So we have this example here. When Dave built his card tower on the rickety table, it collapsed. And the question I have for you is, what collapsed? We might have some intuitions about it. We might think, oh, well, definitely the table collapsed because it's rickety. But if the table collapsed, we're not quite sure because it could also be the card tower, right? Card towers are generally pretty unstable. And if we say, oh, it must be the card tower, well, that table is rickety. So we're not 100% sure what it is. And there's our pronoun. The pronoun is the word it. And it's a little confusing because we're not sure what it is. So we'd want to revise this sentence to make it more clear. So when Dave built his card tower on the rickety table, the table collapsed. Or when Dave built his card tower on the rickety table, the tower collapsed. We'd want to be crystal clear and not have any ambiguity about our pronoun there. A lot of people struggle with who and whom and the word that. And so here are the rules, and we'll look at some examples that will hopefully illuminate them a little bit in the next slide. So who is only ever used as a subject. So who is only ever used as the subject. Whom is only ever used as an object. So we'll look at some examples of that in the next slide as well. The word that refers to things, not people. So Professor VandeWaa is the teacher who teaches English 101. It's not Professor VandeWaa is the teacher that teaches English 101 because that would imply that I'm a robot. And a lot of people might think that already, but I am a person, so we'd say who teaches 101. The last thing, and this is something we'll get back to when we talk about punctuation a little bit later as well, is that we want to watch out for fragments and run-ons. So I'll give you the definitions here real quick, and then we'll take a close look at some examples of this in the next couple of slides. A fragment is an incomplete sentence. If we remember back to the earlier presentation, the part 1 of grammar here, we remember that a complete sentence needs to have two things to be complete. It needs a subject and a verb. So if it's missing one of those two things, then we have a fragment, and that's bad news. A run-on is the opposite of that. A run-on is where we have too much going on in a sentence. So then we have two or more independent clauses with no connection. So again, an independent clause is the same thing as a complete sentence. An independent clause has a subject and a verb. So if we have a subject and a verb, and then the next independent clause we have a subject and a verb, and there's nothing in between them, we have a problem. And we'll look at some examples of that as well. So let's look at a couple examples, put this into practice. Charles was walking with Reginald in the park when a ravenous honey badger suddenly emerged from the shrubbery. He became very agitated. The question then becomes, who became very agitated? Here our pronoun is he, right? And so who is he? Is it Charles? Is it Reginald? Is it the honey badger? We really aren't sure who he is. And so we would want to be crystal clear about it and say, Charles was walking with Reginald in the park when a ravenous honey badger suddenly emerged from the shrubbery. Charles became very agitated. Or Reginald became very agitated. Or the honey badger became very agitated. We want to be crystal clear about it to fix our ambiguous pronoun there. All right, put you to the test. It's a 50-50 shot, so don't feel too bad if you get it wrong. Who or whom have you been consorting with? It's whom. I know it's a little bit tricky, and hopefully someday we'll just say who for everything, but until then, we have to kind of delineate and choose between them. So the way I like to do it is I like to rephrase my question as a sentence, and that helps me find the subject and the verb. So in this sentence, we can rephrase it to say, you have been consorting with someone, right? And so now we have the subject is you, we have the verb have been consorting, right? So you have been consorting with someone. That someone is the object of the sentence. So we'd replace that someone with the word whom in our question. So whom is that someone from our statement earlier? Whom have you been consorting with? It's pretty tricky, and I don't expect everybody to know it right offhand. If you're in doubt, try and guess who. Usually that's a pretty good guess. All right, who or whom yelled my name? If you guessed who, you're right. Someone yelled my name. That someone is the subject of the sentence. They're doing the yelling if we rephrase this question as a statement. And so we'd choose who. Who yelled my name? Right? Someone yelled my name. Someone is who because they're the subject of the sentence. All right. This next slide deals with fragments and run-ons. So what we have here is a sentence that has two independent clauses in it, and we'll go ahead and take a look at it real quick, and then we'll piece out grammatically how it works and how it's put together. So the Leaning Tower of Pisa is a national landmark. Its estimated weight is 14,500 metric tons. Well, when we break that down into its parts, we have two independent clauses. Here's the first one. The Leaning Tower of Pisa is a national landmark. We have a subject, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and we have a verb, is. And that lets us know that it's a complete thought. Another way to help remember that it's a complete thought or that it's an independent clause is if we took it out of context, pulled it out of the sentence that it's in, and we walked up to a stranger and said it, they might be a little bit confused and worried at first, but they would understand the complete thought, the complete sentence there, the independent clause. So the Leaning Tower of Pisa is a national landmark. Does that make sense on its own? Yeah, it's got a subject, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's got a verb, is. And if we walked up to a stranger, they would understand that thought, even if they were a little bit worried about what we were talking about. Or even if they were a little bit confused about what we were talking about. The next independent clause in this sentence is its estimated weight is 14,500 metric tons. Here we have a subject, its estimated weight. We have a verb, is. And so we know that it's got both of the essential elements of a complete sentence, a subject and a verb. And again, if we walked up to a stranger and said its estimated weight is 14,500 metric tons, they might be a little confused about the context of what we're saying, but they would understand that statement in its entirety because it is a complete thought. It is an independent clause. Now, this is a run-on because those two independent clauses are just ram-jammed together with nothing in between them. That's a problem grammatically. So there are a couple of different ways to fix a run-on. The first way is to add in a comma and one of our coordinating conjunctions. If you remember back to our earlier presentation about grammar, about the parts of a sentence, those coordinating conjunctions are the fanboys. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And so we can add in a comma and a coordinating conjunction. We need both of those things to work together. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about punctuation, but we can use a comma and to join our independent clauses correctly. So we still have our two exactly the same independent clauses, but we've corrected our run-on by putting something in between them. We have a comma and an and. Another simple way to fix a run-on is just to put a period between those two independent clauses because independent clauses are complete sentences. They can stand alone as complete sentences. So in this example here, we still have our same independent clauses, but we've added a period to separate them. Because again, independent clauses can stand alone as sentences by themselves. The last way to do it, the last way to fix a run-on sentence is to put in a semicolon. That is actually one of the only things a semicolon does is separate independent clauses. We'll talk more about that when we talk about punctuation. But here again we have our two independent clauses and we've separated them with a semicolon. The beautiful thing about English is that you can change things around and rearrange them any way you'd like. So another way, yet another way we can fix our run-on sentence is to rephrase the whole thing altogether. And in this example, that's what we've done. We've taken it and we've kept our first independent clause, the Leaning Tower of Pisa is a national landmark, but we've interrupted it with a subordinate clause, and we've set that off with commas. Again, we'll talk about commas when we talk about punctuation. So we have this sentence that says the Leaning Tower of Pisa, which weighs about 14,500 metric tons, is a national landmark. And we made that second clause subordinate inside the first one. And so now it's no longer a run-on either. If you need more practice with any of this stuff, there's a lot of options available to you. So if you're struggling with the basics of grammar, you might want to explore how to diagram sentences the old-fashioned way. So let's take a quick look at this link, and I'll post it in the video comments as well so that people can find it. But this is kind of a fun little game that helps you diagram sentences. And what you can do is, they'll show you a little bit of a tutorial here. It's in Comic Sans, so we kind of hate it already, but that's okay. We'll take a look at the next slide here. Here they explain to you, well, what's going to be going on, how do we do it? Then they'll explain to you what happens and what you have to do. Then they'll show you an example. So we have a subject and a verb. They're on a straight line, and then we separate them with a vertical line. So let's take a look at another example here. We have the subject, doctors. We have the verb, examine. We put those on a line, separate them with a vertical line. Next, they're going to want us to do it. So we have nurses, then we have prepare, and we will put the line in the middle there. Great, we did a good job. Excellent. So let's take a look at the next slide. And now they're going to add some more complexity to it. So we'll have a subject, then we'll have a helping verb, and then we'll have the main verb. That's what we did with our future tense when we said, I will go get some coffee later on. And so you can go through this, and then they keep adding complexity to sentences, and it'll really help you understand the relationship between words in a sentence, and it'll help you understand the parts of a sentence a lot better. Another example of a thing you can do is check out the Hacker Handbook exercises, and it's free to sign up for them. You give them your email, and then that helps you log in and register, and they don't send you anything weird. So I'm going to quick do that, and then we'll take a look at what options they have available to you. Okay, so this is the home page for Hacker's Pocket Style Manual exercises. And we were talking about grammar, so we'll go ahead and go to grammar. I'm going to zoom in, make it a little easier to see everything here. So we go to grammar, and they have all kinds of different exercises about different things that we have talked about. So let's look at this first one, subject-verb agreement. And it'll look a lot like the exercise we did in the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll just take the quiz without saving our grades to anything. And what they do is they'll give you a sentence here that they want you to take a look at, and they want you to choose which is the correct answer. So we have, before reaching college, nearly everyone already knows several facts about fables. So here we have that indefinite pronoun, everyone, like we looked at in the PowerPoint. And so we know that it always takes the singular form, ends in S, so we'd want to go knows. And if we submit that, they'll tell us, great. And then they'll explain why we got it right. If we were to do this again and do it wrong and submit it, they would tell us why we got it wrong. So this is a great resource, and again, they have all kinds of different exercises all about these different things that we'll be talking about. That's originally why I developed these PowerPoints, was so that students could get some extra practice in if they needed it. So those are two options available to you if you want to take a look. I'll post some other things in the external resources on my blog to help you out with different things that are with grammar, and a lot of those things will have exercises and quizzes and things along those lines. Okay, I have a few last words about grammar, just to give you a few things to think about as you leave off and start working on your own and creating your own essays and emails and other important documents that have to obey these rules. The first one is that you want to make sure that you read your own work more than just once. Never just type something, click print, or never just type something and click send. You want to go back and make sure you read through your own work, and it really helps to read it out loud as well. The thing is that a lot of errors arise while we're revising or editing as we're drafting. So we don't really notice them until we go back and read over our work and proofread our work. So we might hit the backspace key a few times, or we might copy and paste something, or delete a chunk of text in our, in our writing. And if we don't go back and just double check to make sure that everything fits and flows like it should, then we tend to miss those things, and then we get embarrassed when some silly errors arise in our writing. And so you want to make sure to go back and read over your work more than once. It never hurts to have somebody else take a look at it as well, and it really does help to read your work out loud. Reading your work out loud is one of the best ways to catch some of the most silly and ridiculous errors in grammar. The next tip here is to express yourself clearly and avoid all vagueness. A lot of my students think that they have to write really fancy, or they have to use their extended vocabulary, or right click that thesaurus button to impress me. But that's not what I'm looking for in a piece of writing. When I'm reading a piece of writing, what I want is for it to be clear and concise, and I want it to mean what it says and say what it means. Couple things about that. Extra tips: if something sounds weird to you, you're going to want to rephrase it. Um, Another example here is if it seems like you need to take a deep breath to fully read a sentence, you're going to want to revise it. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it is a pretty good one to live by in your writing. The last thing, of course, is don't be afraid to ask questions or do a little extra work to get better. A lot of students are afraid of that little extra work. You don't want to put more time into a class or more time into your homework than you absolutely have to, but that's not going to make you a better writer. In order to become a better writer, you have to work with what you have. You have to learn to recognize your mistakes, find them in your own writing, and be able to fix them on your own. And then you have to put time and effort in to do that. And definitely don't be afraid to ask questions. I know that a lot of people are afraid to ask questions to the professor because they think it'll be silly, but I would much rather have my students ask a few silly questions along the way than have them be confused. One of my favorite things as a teacher is answering my students' questions. I really enjoy it, even if they are silly. And also, there are a lot of places to look for extra resources. You can look in Hacker, that's that pocket style manual book that I was talking about that we use in my classes. You can look through your course textbooks. A lot of textbooks, especially writing class textbooks, have pointers about revising and editing and grammar and punctuation and mechanics. And of course, don't be afraid to ask for help. Swing down by your writing center, maybe find a tutor, or of course, ask your professor. Most professors are more than willing to sit down and talk with you and help you out with whatever it is that you're working on. So those are my last tips. A couple last words for you to think about as you go out and start doing grammar on your own. The next big chunk of this PowerPoint presentation is an actual practice worksheet that we'll do, where we take a little bit more complex things and try and work out how the grammar works in them. And so stay tuned, and that is where I will see you next. Thanks for listening.